Members, we will now go back to item 16, and John will be staying with us, and we've got the author of the report, Erin Shields, joining us as well, and Warren McLennan's back with us as well. Councillor Cooper, would you be happy to move this?
Yes,
Just reading it now.
I will. No, it's just that it gets, you're flipping back, we're back to 16 now.
We're back to 16. Whanaupai plan change.
Whanaupai.
And do I have a mover?
Yep.
Thank you. I've got a mover and Councillor Watson. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. Erin, would you like to?
I think Councillor
Oh, I'd
Cooper
already moved it. Never mind, it doesn't matter.
Did you move it? I was waiting for the
It
move.
was just
Yeah,
that I was
she said
trying
yes.
to, it doesn't matter, it's fine.
Okay,
It's just
can I go back to
that-
Councillor Cooper because she has been involved
Yeah,
with this?
no, it's all right. I mean, it's fine, but it's just that when we've got this grey thing over the front of stuff, and you can't even see the item number the way it's up there anyway, so it's just tricky, Mr. Chairman. One doesn't want to move something if it doesn't, you don't know what it is.
in your hands? Or Warren?
Perhaps I'll just introduce it, Mr. Chair. This is the, well, we've gone through the completed structure plan process, and now we're at the beginning of the Resource Management Act process, and the idea is that we do a draft plan change before we then go into the formal statutory plan change. So the draft one is really here before you to consider before we go out and talk to the public about it. And I guess the exciting thing about this plan change is that as we have gone through the last few years of unitary plan work, and council has been deeply involved in various sorts of particularly residential zones, here we are, we have a plan change for a piece of greenfield land which has a combination of single house, mixed house urban, terraced housing and apartments, and some business light industry zones which are exactly in line with the unitary plan. So in the old days where we would have drafted particular types of zones and it would have been slightly different and so on, this is the real benefit here going forward, I think, of the unitary plan, where we say, well, here are these zones, and they've got zone policies and statements and rules and so on. So we've picked those up and put them in a logical way into the proposed or the draft plan change, and then we've also been able to take that standardised technique and then add our own sort of placemaking technique. So we've got a precinct layer over the top, and that precinct layer is very particular for Whanaupai. So that's the one which you'll see in the attachment has extra information around indicative arterial roads. It's got some open space. It shows where the permanent and intermittent streams are, so we can deal with stormwater and so on in that sort of way. It also has some comments about reverse sensitivity, because we know we're planning development right next to the Whanaupai Air Force Base, and so the reverse sensitivity there around single house being in that area, and also single house being around that more fragile coastal area. So there's a real combination in here of standardised techniques and yet individuality as well. So this is the first plan change, I guess, to have used those double techniques, and I would particularly like to say thanks so far for the work that the political reference group has done in bouncing some of these ideas around, and the aim is that we're out to public consultation in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Warren. Councillor Watson?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of questions, and one, just seeking a little further reassurance in terms of the reverse sensitivity. One of the things that I often hear when I'm out in Auckland and just did so yesterday about the engine testing that's taking place right next to 1B, so which when the wind's blowing a certain way, would go straight onto any properties there. So just really seeking clarification that that's encompassed by the reverse sensitivity policy of the plan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and through you. The operations on the airbase have been front and centre for us throughout the development of the structure plan and the plan change. They do seem to do what they like, where they like, in terms of engine testing, and we have provisions in the plan that manage the takeoff or the departure and arrival of planes, and so there are air noise contours, and in the unitary plan as it is in its operative state, the noise sensitive activities are managed through an existing operative provisions in the plan. And so we have taken the stance that on the edge of the airbase it's single house, and you'll see that there is a line of single house along the southern edge, and as you get further away from the airbase, it turns into mixed housing urban, so higher density. The plan will require sort of acoustic insulation for those houses so that people can actually have some interior amenity, one would hope.
I'll be interested to hear how the first residents get on.
Yeah.
The other one is just to do with engagement, and I looked at point number 16, the locations identified for engagement, and I would just sort of make a request that either by substitution for one of them, that the Whenua Pai Hall be included there. That has had certainly ones I've been at, and Councillor Walker, very well attended, and as I understand it from the local Ratepayers Association, that's the centre of their community. That's where people gravitate and indeed have done so already throughout this whole process. So I just request that be included, please, as one of the places for engagement, and by all means drop off one of the other ones if that works.
Through the chair, the context, we had, through the structure plan, we used that hall extensively, and when we followed up with the community after the structure plan, and they felt a little bit sort of guilty by association, for want of a better term, that they asked us to not solely focus on using that hall as the singular venue, and so we've tried to spread it around this time, but we can certainly go back to the Residents and Ratepayers Committee and ask if they're okay with that, and I can follow that up for you.
I'd appreciate that, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper?
Thank you. I must say, though, the parking outside the Whenua Pai Hall is not great, and people end up parking all over the berms, etc. It's quite tricky. I guess for me, I just want to thank our staff, because they've done an amazing job in a quite short time frame to get this ready, and the early engagement I think will bode quite well, because people have felt quite included, so that's been really good. Just for me, I mean, I know that there's going to be quite a few people, are going to be people that are going to be upset, and there's going to be people that are going to be really happy, but I think for me, in context of all our future or our urban lands, supply that's coming on stream, is that that ability to stage is kind of crucial with our whole infrastructure issue going on at the moment, and I think that's one of the things that's been really taken into account here, is that if we can't guarantee people's infrastructure and the ability to get around from where they're going to live, we have to stage this. So for me, that's an important part of this, that we have considered those effects, and also just being quite sensible about what's already there. I just want to comment on the reverse sensitivity. I mean, this has been part of this area for absolutely half a century or more, and I think anybody buying into there has to do their due diligence, and we can't really be surprised if people want to open their windows all the time and then complain about the noise. I mean, that's just from a personal point of view, and having lived near that area for a long time as a child, young person growing up, and with helicopters jigger-jigging in my ear most days, and being able to hear the engines from my place in West Harbour still. So, but I hope that the people that come and live here embrace that existing use, because it is really an integral part, and there's no plans to take it away at the moment, and I would hate to see that we have a situation now like we have with the port. You know, something that's been there for a long time, and then everybody turns and says, no, I don't like it, it annoys my amenity, because it's a crucial part of this community and a crucial part of our national security. Thank you.
Yeah, great housing development day.
And sorry, Mr. Chairman, it was good. The other thing that I just want to say quickly is that the land that we have opened up, it's filling up fast, and I was at the turning of the sod last week of a piece of land, an iwi consortium, and that's actually building housing for defence staff. So that's going to be a huge, you know, change for those defence staff to live in some new houses with all the right insulation and soundproofing. So
Thank you.
to see, but if we open it up too quickly, we end up with
Councillor Wayne Walker?
Yeah, just got a question around the open space, the reserve area. What would be the rough percentage of reserve area across the structure plan? And the reason I ask that is so that we've got a comparison with what was historically the case in Auckland, which was 7.5%.
Okay. Through the chair, the open space was worked on extensively through the structure plan itself, and indicative locations for pocket parks and a couple of city parks. So our parks people are currently working on acquiring some land for sports fields, and that in terms of the 7.5%, I think the same type of percentage has been used here.
And I guess the reason I ask that is if you look over the road at Hobsonville, it might be, you know, a couple of percent that we're looking at. I mean, that's what's rolling out in new areas, sometimes closer to 1%.
Yeah.
It would be useful just to have that high-level analysis,
Okay.
because what we're moving to is a circumstance where new subdivision areas bear no resemblance to the Auckland that we've been used to, against the background of more intensity of dwelling and no backyards.
Yeah. Through the chair, if I may, we're preparing additional information for the engagement, which sort of has a commentary attached to the plan change to explain what we've done in terms of going from the structure plan to the plan change. So we can incorporate that sort of commentary in there so that the public are aware of that percentage type issue as well.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, just an observation. One of the questions that I ask on an ongoing basis for subdivisions is, what is the percentage of reserve space? Because that gives us a benchmark going forward across everything. And it also gives us a better tool to lobby the government for on an ongoing basis. It's critical. The other question I've got that just goes to reserves is really whether we've done a mapping exercise on the myriad of community facilities that often locate on public space, and they can be things like scouts and guides and all sorts of things that we've customarily been used to in Auckland, certainly in the existing areas that have been the case as compared to new.
And so through the chair, again, I go back to the structure plan where our community facilities staff identified what will be called Whenuapai Centre, which is where the existing shops are next to the special housing areas, as a location for a community facility. Over time, as those parks and reserves are vested with council through subdivision, there may well be that new community that is not there yet asking this council for space, for buildings and activities. And so that's part of the future decision making of the council as in its role of building the fabric of this community.
Okay, and through you, Mr. Chair, the reason I ask that question is that my observation is in the new areas that are being developed, there aren't the locations for the things that Aucklanders would have been used to and just assumed that were there, because the space available is just so compressed. So those sorts of mapping exercises are really important going forward.
Thank you. Good things for the staff to pick up on. So it is moved by Councillor Cooper, it's seconded by Councillor Watson. There being no other contributions and debate, I'll put that vote on A to D. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you, Erin, Warren, John. And we'll now go